Millionaire comes home early, finds his wife kicking the cleaning lady's black daughter. What he does shocks everyone. The sound of Vivian's high heels echoed across the marble floor of the mansion, followed by the dull thud of something small hitting the wall. Useless brat. How many times do I have to tell you not to touch my things? Jonathan Rivers stopped at the entrance to the living room, still holding the keys to his Bentley. His board meeting had ended 2 hours early, and he had decided to come home to enjoy Friday afternoon with his family. What he saw left him paralyzed. Lana, only 8 years old, was cowering in the corner of the room, tears streaming down her face as she clutched a broken vase. Blood trickled from a small cut on her knee. Vivian, his wife of 3 years, stood over the girl with an expression of pure hatred Jonathan had never seen before. "Do you know how much that vase cost, you little brat?" Vivian pointed her manicured finger at the child's face. "More than your mother earns in a year cleaning this house." Jonathan had known Lana since she was a little girl. Carmen, her mother, had worked as a cleaner in the mansion for nearly a decade, long before his second marriage. Lana had always been polite, intelligent, and curious. She often came with her mother during school vacations, and Jonathan enjoyed her presence in the house. "Please, Mrs. Vivian," Lana's small voice trembled. "I was just trying to help clean up." The vase slipped out of my hand when I heard a loud noise from the television. "Liar!" Vivian raised her hand as if to slap the child. In that moment, something inside Jonathan awakened. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. For 3 years, Vivian had played the perfect wife in front of him and their guests, polite, elegant, always knowing the right words at social events. But now, alone with a defenseless child, she revealed her true self. "Vivian." Jonathan's voice cut through the air like a knife. She turned quickly, her face shifting from cruelty to feigned surprise. "Jonathan, dear, I didn't hear you come in. This girl just broke the Ming vase her mother gave us as a wedding gift." Jonathan watched the scene with new eyes. Lana's cut knee, her trembling posture, the fear in her eyes. It was clear this wasn't an isolated accident. His years of executive meetings had taught him to read body language. What he saw was the fear of someone who had endured this before. "Lana," Jonathan said softly, ignoring Vivian. "Are you hurt?" The girl looked nervously between them before nodding timidly. "Where is your mother?" "She went to the market to buy cleaning supplies," Lana whispered. Jonathan knelt to her level, careful not to scare her further. "How long has Mrs. Vivian been talking to you like this when I'm not home?" The silence that followed was more revealing than any words. "Jonathan, you're overreacting," Vivian interjected sharply. "It was just an accident. I was explaining that she needs to be more careful." But Jonathan couldn't take his eyes off Lana. There was something in her expression, a forced maturity, a cautiousness no 8-year-old should have. It was the look of someone who had learned to anticipate danger. "Has she been harsh with you other times?" Jonathan asked gently. Lana glanced at Vivian, then lowered her eyes to the floor. The fear on her face told Jonathan everything he needed to know. At that moment, Jonathan Rivers, CEO of a technology company worth $500 million, realized he had been deceived for 3 years. Worse, a child had been suffering abuse in his home while he was too focused on building his empire to see it. Vivian's expression shifted when she noticed Jonathan wasn't accepting her story. For a moment, the same cruel look she had shown Lana flickered across her face before being masked with false innocence. But Jonathan had seen it. And now, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The tense look Carmen often carried. Lana's unusual silence around Vivian. The innocent comments about properly educating employees' children. If you're wondering how a smart man could be deceived for so long, subscribe to the channel to discover just how far manipulation can go and what happens when the mask finally comes off. "Jonathan, you're being dramatic," Vivian said theatrically, adjusting her platinum blonde hair with exaggerated grace. She broke a priceless piece. "Someone has to teach these children responsibility or they'll grow up thinking they can do whatever they want." Jonathan noticed the way she spat out the word children, dripping with disdain. 3 years of marriage, and only now did he see the signs he had ignored. "Lana," Jonathan said gently, ignoring his wife's glare. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" The girl's voice shook. "I was helping clean the living room like I always do when I come with Mom. I heard a really loud noise on the TV and got scared. When I turned around quickly, my elbow hit the vase." "Lies!" Vivian snapped. "I saw her playing with it, pretending it was a microphone. These kids don't understand the value of things." Jonathan leaned closer to Lana. "What kind of noise did you hear on the television?" Her eyes filled with tears. "It was a lady yelling very loudly at a little girl. She said really mean things, like Mrs. Vivian talks to me when Mom isn't here." The answer came out in an almost inaudible whisper. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. "How long has this been going on, Lana?" Vivian cleared her throat loudly. "Jonathan, this is ridiculous. Are you going to believe the fantasies of a spoiled child? She's clearly trying to divert attention from what she did." But Jonathan kept his focus on Lana. "Can you tell me about other times this has happened?" The girl lowered her eyes. "Mrs. Vivian said that if I told anyone, Mom would lose her job and we wouldn't have money for food. She said people like us should be grateful to be here and not cause trouble." Jonathan felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "People like—" Lana hesitated, touching her own dark skin. "Go on." Jonathan encouraged her. "People are color. Mrs. Vivian said I should always remember my place because girls like me can't afford to break important people's things." The silence that followed was piercing. Jonathan looked at Vivian, who had completely lost the sweet expression she always wore in front of him. For a moment, her social mask fell, revealing something cold and calculating that made Jonathan question whether he had ever truly known the woman he had shared a bed with for 3 years. "This is a misunderstanding," Vivian said quickly, noticing Jonathan's piercing gaze. "I was just trying to teach her appropriate boundaries. Carmen is an excellent employee, but sometimes her daughter lacks supervision." "Supervision," Jonathan repeated slowly. At that moment, the front door opened. Carmen had returned from the market. Jonathan watched as Lana instantly stiffened and Vivian quickly recomposed her face into its usual sweet mask. "Jonathan? Lana?" Carmen called from the hallway. "Did something happen?" She entered the room carrying brown paper bags and immediately sensed the tension in the air. Her eyes darted to her daughter's bruised knee, then to the broken porcelain on the floor, and finally to Vivian's icy expression. Jonathan noticed something in Carmen he had never seen before, the same controlled fear he had just seen in Lana's eyes. How had he been so blind for so long? "Carmen," Vivian said in a honeyed voice, "your daughter had a little accident with the Ming vase. Fortunately, she wasn't seriously hurt, but we need to talk about proper supervision when she comes to work with you." Carmen slowly lowered the bags. "Lana, are you okay, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Mom," Lana replied automatically. But Jonathan noticed how she avoided her mother's gaze. "Carmen," Jonathan said calmly, "can you take Lana to the kitchen? I need to bandage that wound. Vivian and I will talk here." Carmen nodded quickly, taking her daughter's hand. Before they left, Jonathan saw the exchange of glances between mother and daughter, a silent communication that spoke of shared fear and long-held secrets. As soon as they were alone, Vivian changed tactics. "Jonathan, dear, you're letting a simple situation become unnecessary drama. Children make up stories, especially when they want to avoid consequences." "Consequences?" Jonathan crossed his arms. "What kind of consequences have you been enforcing in my absence?" "Basic discipline," Vivian replied, her voice losing some of its artificial sweetness. "Someone has to teach this girl respect and responsibility. Carmen is too permissive." "And you thought it was your responsibility to do that?" Vivian looked at him as if he were a child asking an obvious question. "Jonathan, I am the lady of this house. It is my duty to maintain order and proper standards, especially with the children of the servants." The way she said "children of the servants" revealed a social hierarchy Jonathan had never realized she upheld. He began to wonder how many other things he had missed in the last 3 years. "What proper standards?" he asked. "Respect for property, knowledge of appropriate social boundaries, gratitude for the generosity they receive by being allowed here." Vivian gestured around the mansion as if it were self-evident. Jonathan felt a disturbing clarity settle over him. Vivian, Lana is 8 years old. Exactly the right age to learn about social hierarchies. If she learns young, she'll grow into an adult better adjusted to the realities of the world. Realities? Jonathan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Jonathan, be realistic. Vivian sighed impatiently. Carmen is a cleaning lady. Lana will probably follow the same path. It's cruel to give unrealistic hopes to people in certain social positions. I'm just preparing her for real life. At that moment, Jonathan realized he hadn't married Vivian. He had married a carefully constructed performance. The woman standing before him now, speaking about social hierarchies and the fate of an 8-year-old, was a complete stranger. "And what if I disagree with your approach?" he asked. Vivian laughed. A cold, hollow sound Jonathan had never heard before. "Jonathan, you work 14 hours a day building your empire. Do you really think you have the time or knowledge to question how I run our home?" Jonathan studied her face. "Our home?" "Yes," Vivian continued confidently. "I've been managing all domestic matters for 3 years. I hire employees, fire them when necessary, set rules and standards. You never cared about these details before." For the first time, Jonathan wondered how many employees Vivian had fired, and for what reasons. How many families had been harmed by her negligence, her cruelty, her unchecked power within his own household. "Maybe it's time I cared more," he said simply. Vivian studied him, her eyes narrowing, something calculating flickering beneath the surface. "Of course, dear," she said smoothly. "But you know how complicated these situations can be. Carmen is a loyal employee, but if she starts causing problems or teaching her daughter to be disrespectful, well, there are plenty of people who need work these days." The threat was subtle, but crystal clear. Jonathan realized he was looking at a woman who wielded fear and economic insecurity like weapons. From the kitchen came low voices, Carmen treating Lana's injury while they whispered. Jonathan wondered how many similar conversations had taken place over the past 3 years. How many physical and emotional wounds had been treated in silence. "Vivian," he said slowly, "I think you and I need to rethink some things about how this house works." She studied him with new eyes, realizing something had irrevocably shifted in the dynamic between them. "Jonathan, I hope you're not thinking of making rash decisions based on a child's dramatizations." But Jonathan was no longer listening to her words. He was watching her micro-expressions, the way she chose each phrase, how she tested the ground to see how far she could push. It was like watching a strategist in action, and he wondered, how long had he been manipulated without realizing it? For 3 years, while he built his company and accumulated wealth, an 8-year-old child had been systematically broken inside his own home, and the woman responsible was already calculating how to spin his discovery, completely underestimating his ability to act. What Vivian didn't know was that Jonathan Rivers hadn't become a millionaire at 35 by being passive or naive, and she was about to learn that some storms, once awakened, sweep away everything in their path. In the kitchen, Jonathan found Carmen carefully cleaning Lana's cut knee with a gentleness that stood in stark contrast to the emotional brutality the girl had endured minutes earlier. The mother and daughter whispered to each other, voices laced with fear and resignation. "Carmen," Jonathan said softly, making them both jump. "Can we talk?" Carmen visibly stiffened. 28 years of cleaning the homes of wealthy families had taught her that conversations like this rarely ended well for people like her. "Of course, Mr. Jonathan. If I've done something wrong—" "You haven't done anything wrong," Jonathan interrupted. "But I need to understand what's been happening here when I'm not home." Lana grabbed her mother's hand, her large eyes fixed on Jonathan's face. Carmen looked nervously toward the room where Vivian remained, clearly weighing the risks of telling the truth against the danger of lying. "Mrs. Vivian, she has specific ways of keeping order in the house," Carmen said carefully, choosing each word as if walking through a minefield. "What kind of ways?" Carmen exchanged a glance with Lana. It was the girl who spoke, her voice small but determined. "Mr. Jonathan, can I tell you the truth? Even if Mrs. Vivian gets very angry?" Jonathan knelt down to Lana's height. "You can always tell the truth, and I promise that nothing bad will happen to you or your mother because of it. Mrs. Vivian said that children like me need to know our place. Lana began slowly. She said it's very generous of her to let Mom bring a defective black girl into her beautiful home, and that if I didn't behave properly, she would send us away without references. Jonathan felt his jaw tighten. Did she use those exact words? She always talks about how people of our color should be grateful for the opportunities that important people give us, Carmen murmured, finally finding the courage to speak. And that children like Lana need to understand they will never have the same chances as rich white children. So, it's better to learn humility early. Mom cried last night, Lana added quietly. Mrs. Vivian said she was going to make up a story that Mom was stealing jewelry if we caused any trouble. She even showed us a bracelet she said she would hide in our bag. Jonathan felt something cold run down his spine. Carmen, how long has this been going on? Since the first month after she married you, Carmen admitted, tears beginning to stream down her face. But Mr. Jonathan, we need this job. It's just me and Lana, without references. Jonathan understood the perfect trap Vivian had constructed. Carmen was caught between accepting abuse or risking complete financial ruin, and Vivian knew exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. Carmen, I want you to know that your job is secure regardless of what happens with Vivian, Jonathan said firmly. And I want to document everything you've told me. Would you be willing to do that? Before Carmen could respond, Vivian's voice echoed from the living room. Jonathan, honey, where are you? We need to resolve this situation quickly. I have a social engagement in an hour. Jonathan noticed how Lana instinctively cringed at the sound of Vivian's voice, and how Carmen automatically assumed a submissive posture. 3 years of psychological conditioning had turned his home into a prison for this family. Stay here, Jonathan said. I'm going to get something from my office and then we'll talk again. In his office, Jonathan opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. As CEO, he had dealt with multiple cases of harassment and discrimination at his company, and he knew exactly what kind of documentation would be necessary. But first, he needed professional help. He called Diana Rodriguez, a civil rights lawyer he had met at networking events. It was Friday at 5 p.m., but Diana answered on the second ring. Jonathan, what a surprise. How can I help? Diana, I need your help with something very serious. It involves psychological and racial abuse against an 8-year-old child. In my own home. The line went silent for a moment. I'm listening, Diana said. Jonathan quickly explained the situation. Diana listened without interruption, asking precise questions that revealed her experience with similar cases. Jonathan, legally, you're in a strong position to protect Carmen and Lana, but emotionally, the damage has already been done. We need to act quickly and comprehensively, Diana said. Can I be there in 40 minutes? That should be possible. And Jonathan, record everything. Every conversation with Vivian from now on. Her behavior suggests she will escalate once she feels threatened. While waiting for Diana, Jonathan returned to the kitchen. Carmen and Lana were still sitting together, whispering. When she saw him, Carmen quickly stood up. Mr. Jonathan, on second thought, maybe it's better not to get involved in this situation. Mrs. Vivian is right about some things. People like us should be grateful. Carmen, Jonathan interrupted her gently. No one, regardless of color or social class, deserves to be treated the way Vivian has treated you, and especially not a child. Lana looked at him with eyes far too wise for her age. Mr. Jonathan, can we trust you? Really? The question cut deep. This 8-year-old was questioning whether an adult would keep his promises, something no child her age should ever have to wonder. You can trust me, Lana, and I'll prove it to you. At that moment, they heard Vivian speaking on the phone in the living room, her voice thick with irritation. Yes, Mom, I know you think I'm being too hard on the employees, but someone has to keep these people in their place. Jonathan is too soft. He doesn't understand how to deal with certain social classes. Jonathan, Carmen, and Lana exchanged glances. Vivian had just revealed that her behavior wasn't an isolated moment of anger, but a deliberate philosophy she openly shared with others. Of course, I'm not going to let Jonathan ruin years of work establishing appropriate boundaries, Vivian continued. If he wants to play social savior, he'll learn that there are consequences. Vivian's phone conversation revealed something chilling. Not only had she abused Carmen and Lana, but she had also developed strategies to neutralize any interference from Jonathan. The tone of her voice suggested she already had plans in motion, plans that wouldn't be pleasant for anyone. Jonathan realized he was facing someone far more calculating and dangerous than he had imagined. Vivian wasn't just a prejudiced woman losing her temper. She was a systematic manipulator who had spent 3 years planning and executing a regime of psychological abuse. From the living room came fragments of conversation that suggested Vivian was already mobilizing outside resources for her defense. From the confidence in her tone, she clearly believed it would be easy to neutralize any threat Jonathan posed. What she didn't know was that Jonathan Rivers had built a $500 million empire by never being naive about human nature. And when he finally decided to act against an injustice, his response was always meticulous and devastating. While Vivian plotted on the other side of the house, Jonathan quietly documented every word, preparing a counteroffensive she would never see coming. Because some battles aren't won with shouting or confrontation, they are won with intelligence, resources, and a precise understanding of how power works in the real world. 20 minutes later, when Diana arrived with 2 private investigators and professional recording equipment, Vivian was still on the phone organizing what was clearly a smear campaign against Jonathan. Her voice echoed through the house with confidence that was about to collapse into a nightmare. "If Jonathan tries to cause me trouble over this ridiculous situation with the employees, we'll activate Plan B," Vivian laughed. 3 years of documenting his outbursts of anger and emotional instability will get me a very generous alimony settlement. Jonathan signaled to Diana, who immediately began recording. Carmen and Lana remained in the kitchen but could hear every word through the discreetly activated intercom. "Of course, I made up situations to provoke his reactions," Vivian continued smugly. "Rich men are so predictable when they feel challenged. And now, with this whole story of defending the black maid and her little girl, I can paint him as unstable and unfit to manage his own fortune?" Diana raised her eyebrows and whispered to Jonathan, "She's confessing to conspiracy to commit matrimonial fraud. Keep recording, but the best was yet to come." Vivian, completely absorbed in her call, didn't notice when Jonathan approached with a tablet streaming the conversation live on his professional LinkedIn profile, where he had over 50,000 contacts in the business world. "The funniest part," Vivian laughed, "is that I made the black girl fear me so much she wouldn't even dream of telling anyone. Kids from that social class are so easy to intimidate. Just threaten the family's financial stability and they become completely submissive." By then, the live stream had already passed 1,000 viewers, including several CEOs and business leaders Jonathan knew personally. Comments of shock and outrage appeared in real time. "Jonathan will learn that there are consequences for interfering with my methods of household management," Vivian continued, lost in her fantasy of control. "And if he insists on defending these people, I'll make sure the entire social elite knows what kind of man he really is, someone who puts employees above his own wife." It was at that moment Jonathan stepped into the room, still holding the tablet. "Vivian, dear, you have an audience." She turned, the phone still to her ear, and her face instantly paled at the sight of the device in his hands and the growing number of live viewers. 200 people just heard your philosophy on domestic management," Jonathan said calmly, "including the board of directors of the Hamilton Charitable Foundation, where you've been volunteering for the past 2 years. The phone slipped from Vivian's hand, crashing onto the marble floor. Her mother's voice shrieked from the speaker. "Vivian! Vivian! What's going on?" Diana stepped forward, showing her ID. "Vivian Ashford. Yes. We know your real name. You are being formally notified of an investigation into psychological abuse, intimidation based on racial discrimination, and conspiracy to commit matrimonial fraud." "This is a misunderstanding," Vivian stammered. Desperately trying to regain composure, "You're taking his words out of context." "Context," Jonathan laughed bitterly. "Vivian, you just explained, lived to thousands of people, how you psychologically tortured an 8-year-old child for 3 years, using her skin color and economic situation as tools of intimidation. At that moment, Carmen entered the room holding Lana's hand. The girl looked directly at Vivian, and for the first time in 3 years, there was no fear in her eyes. "Miss Vivian," Lana said in a surprisingly firm voice, "Mr. Jonathan taught me that people who hurt children are called bullies, and bullies are only strong when no one is watching." Vivian tried one last gambit. "Jonathan, are you going to destroy our life because of one employee? Think about what you're doing." "I am thinking, Vivian," Jonathan replied, his voice controlled but relentless. "I'm thinking that for 3 years you built a regime of psychological terror in my own home, using a child as your victim. I'm thinking that you've seriously underestimated both my ability to discover the truth and the consequences of your actions." The tablet now showed over 7,000 views, with notifications pouring in, messages of outrage, expressions of support for Jonathan, and several business contacts announcing they were cutting ties with any institution associated with Vivian. "Your volunteer services at the Hamilton Foundation have been canceled," Diana informed her, reading from her phone. "The Malibu Country Club is revoking your membership. And apparently 3 different charities where you served are removing your name from all promotional materials." Vivian collapsed into an armchair, finally comprehending the magnitude of her downfall. In less than an hour, she had lost her social reputation, her positions in prestigious organizations, and the identity she had built on status and power over others. "The best part," Jonathan said, turning off the live stream, "is that you did all this yourself. I just provided the platform for the world to see the real Vivian Ashford." Carmen approached Jonathan. "Mr. Jonathan, how can we ever thank you?" "There's no need to thank me, Carmen. I should be apologizing for taking 3 years to realize what was happening under my own roof." Lana let go of her mother's hand and walked over to Jonathan. "Mr. Jonathan, now I understand what Mom always told me about good people. They don't care about the color of our skin or how much money we have. They care if we're good people on the inside." While Vivian sat in silence, processing the complete destruction of her social and financial life, one last notification arrived on Jonathan's phone. A reporter from a major local newspaper was requesting an interview about discriminatory practices in the homes of wealthy families. Vivian's downfall was not just beginning. It was about to become a case study in how prejudice and abuse of power can be completely unmasked when the truth finally comes to light. And the most ironic part of all, she herself had provided every piece of evidence necessary for her own destruction completely, underestimating the intelligence and determination of the very people she had spent 3 years trying to subjugate.